Welcome everybody on this fine day. Should I give a weather forecast? I don't know where everybody's from, so I probably shouldn't do that. But I can tell you that if you are in Ontario, that it is going to warm up significantly early next week. And I just wanted to start off this health and wellness straight talk with a little bit of positive news. So we've got that. And I'm so glad that you have come to join us for this webinar. I think it's going to be very interesting, to say the least. And yes, we're talking about didn't see it coming, financing the unexpected. And I think, really that's what insurance is all about, right? We never want anything to happen. We never want to see the negative in our future, but it's great to be prepared because it's going to make all the difference. My name is Kim McDonald. I was talking about the weather because I am a host at the Weather Network. I've been here for 24 years, talking weather to Canadians from coast to coast. I love what I do. I'm also an ambassador for the Breast Cancer Society of Canada, unfortunately, because I had breast cancer, but fortunately, it was 5 years ago, and I'm here today, and I'm doing better than ever. I feel great. It certainly was unexpected for me. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to other people about this situation. And I know it's tough talk, but it's straight talk, and that's what we're here for. We're here to have a conversation. So I want to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Kimberly Carson, who leads the Breast Cancer Society of Canada. She's the CEO, and she interacts with researchers and survivors on a daily basis. So Kimberly has a lot of knowledge about what the Breast Cancer Society is doing and what researchers are doing, and we're going to tap into that info and find out a little more about the great discoveries that are being made on a daily basis through research because of the Breast Cancer Society of Canada. We also have here today our real straight talk person. I don't want to say that, Adam Mamdani, and he is from RBC Insurance. He manages retail and advice distribution, and he's going to talk about the why we need to plan for the unexpected. And he has a lot of great advice, and I think you're going to like it. And then we have Charlene Judge, and I'm so happy Charlene is here. Charlene recently dealt with breast cancer. She's a survivor, and we can all learn from her insight. And before I get into, or you get into, Charlene, what your experience was, I really want to let people know that everybody's experience is very different. It's individual. People are individuals, so their diagnoses are individuals, the way they're treated. It's an individual treatment. So one size does not fit all, but there are a lot of common threads when it comes to dealing with breast cancer. So Charlene, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for telling your story. So let's begin at the beginning of the story. Where were you in your life when you were diagnosed?
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And the beginning is always a good place to start. So if we rewind to September of 2020, I was living my life as I normally did. I went about going to my family physician for my annual checkup, and I left with the normal paperwork. And one of those things was a mammogram. I've been having regular mammograms for at least 10 years. My mother is a 3-time cancer survivor, including breast cancer twice. So I had my mammogram, and I immediately got a phone call. The phone call was, we need you to go have a needle biopsy. Something doesn't look great this year. And sure enough, the needle biopsy indicated cancer. By October the 7th, I had my surgery. And, hearing those 4 scary words, you have breast cancer, as you know, Kim, is very scary and very unnerving. And, I was otherwise healthy. I had no signs, no symptoms whatsoever. So if it wasn't for the mammogram, my very aggressive triple positive breast cancer would not have been detected. So I do want to remind people to make sure that they go and have their annual mammograms. It can definitely be life-saving, and early detection is key. So from there, I continued working. I took a few days off, and then learned that I would have to have chemotherapy, Herceptin, and radiation. So I continued working until I started my chemotherapy, and I started my chemotherapy in December. and went through a number of chemotherapy protocols, and then continued with radiation, and then continued with the Herceptin treatments. And I did go back to work in September of 2021. So I was off for about 9 months. Yeah, a lot of unexpected things along that journey, as you well know yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. I can forget what I had for lunch yesterday, Charlene, but being diagnosed and all those first weeks, it's in the brain. I can retell that story over and over without missing a beat, and I'm sure you're the same thing. It's one of those things that becomes indelible in your memory. Okay, so as far as work was concerned, did you have a partner who also was working? Did you have kids? What was going on in your life when this happened?
Yeah, so I'm a single mom, and I didn't have anybody else to financially support me. So fortunately, I had a conversation about 6 years prior with my life insurance advisor, who suggested that I take advantage of disability insurance and also critical illness insurance. And thank goodness I did, because my daughter is 21 and she's training to be a nurse. And her and I, although we have RESPs, we were, needing to augment that and continue to finance her education. Also, because of the products that I had taken advantage of while I was on long-term disability, I was able to continue to contribute to my retirement savings portfolio. Had I not had that coverage, I wouldn't have had the ability or the capability to continue to do that. And, that would have set me back significantly.
Sure.
So yeah, basically single mom trying to pay the bills and go about normal life as much as possible. And as you know, as when you're going through this, there are numerous appointments and trips to the hospital, to the doctors, and so on. So there are a lot of unforeseen additional costs over and above paying your normal bills that people don't think about. Like, for instance, medications that aren't covered under the Ontario Health Insurance Plan or other plans, like special nutrition to keep your strength up and that type of thing. Like having to buy new clothes or such. As your hair starts to fall out, you look a lot different, and all of a sudden, there's other things that you want to do, even from a health and beauty perspective, because all of a sudden the way you used to dress or the way you used to look is very different. So there are a number of things that are unforeseen that I would have never imagined that I would need to have paid for. Parking. I joked with my friend, I probably paid enough parking to pave the parking lot of the hospital or pay for a permanent spot. It's just
Yes.
crazy.
You know what I would do? I would get a different friend to bring me to chemo. This is pre COVID days, of course, when people could come with you and sit with you in chemotherapy. So I'd bring somebody different every time, and I would go to pay for parking, and they would say, "Oh no, I'll pay for the parking." So I had somebody different pay for the parking every time, not on purpose. I was always willing to pay, but it was, it's $10 a shot. And say you're going to radiation, that's 5 days a week. For me, it was
Yeah,
5 days a week for 5 weeks. That's a lot of money, unless somebody
that's
just
right.
drops you off. And people, you don't think about that. You think, okay, well, healthcare is free in Canada. Okay, yes, you can get your chemotherapy and radiation, but what about your bills, your mortgage, and then all the other things that you're talking about, like you want to exercise, for example.
Yeah, I worked actually with a nutritionist who really helped me to repair my blood cells, and particularly my red blood cells, and also my personal trainer throughout, just so I could keep my strength up. And certainly there were many days where I wasn't able to do my normal regime or my normal workout, but having access to funds to be able to continue to do that was super important, and I think very material to me being able to return to work as quickly as I was able to.
Yeah.
Again, just some more. And then, even people who need to deal with the mental health aspects of this. I mean, it sounds vain, but losing your hair can be quite catastrophic when you're somebody who's been used to having very long hair their entire life. It's obviously something that you get over in the grand scheme of things, but you know, that there are a lot of, as you well know, a lot of ups and downs when you're going through chemotherapy and radiation, and even the side effects of some of the drugs. I mean, you know, you're on steroids and all kinds of things, and they have different effects on your mental health. So for me, working with my nutritionist and working with my personal trainer were great ways to deal with the mental health aspects.
For sure. People don't realize how important that is to work out. I didn't do a lot of working out during my treatment, but certainly as soon as I was done, man, I was back at it. You know, you talk about losing your hair, and then of course there's buying wigs and or kerchiefs or hats or whatever it is for your head. But my oncologist actually said to me that one of the toughest parts of going through breast cancer treatment for women is losing their hair. And he told me this at the beginning before I lost my hair, and I was like, come on, you know, is that, and it was true. It was very true. It's such a part of who you are. And for women, I mean, breast cancer just attacks so many things about our femininity, right? Our hair, our breasts, we are thrown into menopause, all kinds of things happen to us. And that's, you know, people think of it as a woman disease, although men get breast cancer too, as you know. So because you had this insurance, you were, these things didn't become luxuries then for you. You just got to do them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I can't imagine what my journey would have been like, to be honest, without having access to those things. And I would just say, you know, even in terms of losing your hair, sometimes when it comes back, and it comes back a completely different color and texture and everything, it's an adventure for sure. And
Yes.
I'm very, very grateful that I was able to continue to be able to have access to all those things without having to worry, because the last thing you want to worry about when you're trying to recover and trying to go through these types of things is whether or not you can pay your bills, and whether or not, you know, do I have enough money to access a nutritionist? Do I have enough money to continue to work with my personal trainer to build my health back up? I can't imagine not having access to those products and to that funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very grateful that I had the conversation I had 6 years prior with my advisor. It was fantastic advice.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got in there. So lucky, you know, that you did all this planning ahead of time and you had somebody to actually advise you on that. My company covered so much for me. And I remember at the beginning with the short-term disability, it was, I think we're upwards of 80% of my salary I was supposed to get. And I got a call from our HR manager, and she said to me, hey, I just wanted to tell you, I have some good news. We're going to top you up to 100% for your short-term disability. And I started to cry because I just I wasn't expecting anything, you know what I mean? And it was like, and then she started to cry, and she's like, I need to put the phone down. And then she she puts the phone down and walks away, and I'm just waiting for her to, you know, stop blowing her nose or whatever and come back. But it was such a beautiful gesture by my company, which was, it was great. But I work for a company and I have benefits, but there are a lot of people who work for themselves and don't have anything like that, you know?
Yeah. I see we have a question in the chat about whether or not wigs are covered under insurance. And so I think it may depend on your company coverage. So if
Right.
you're not self-employed and you do work for an employer, some of the employee plans cover a percentage. But the beautiful thing about the disability or the critical illness insurance policy that I had, it's kind of a lump sum payout. And so you can kind of take the money and do with it
Use
as
it.
you please.
Oh, nice.
And that's what I mean in terms of having flexibility to be able to pay for a personal trainer or a nutritionist. Both of those things are not covered by my employer's healthcare plan. But that's what I used my critical illness insurance for, was to pay for you know, things to make myself better in terms of my mental health, my physical health, my appearance. You know, even things you don't realize. I mean, you lose your eyelashes, your eyebrows, everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I chose to have my eyebrows microbladed, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But again, I mean, that was a luxury that I was able to afford because I had the critical illness insurance coverage.
That's awesome.
You know, interesting, like as you both are talking about you know, your own personal experiences going through this, we did a quick questionnaire on Twitter prior to running this webinar today, asking people if they would be prepared if they had a critical diagnosis like breast cancer. And you'd be very surprised at the answer about how many people thought that they were going to be well enough prepared if there was a critical illness. And I'm going to tell you 100% said no. So,
Wow.
the fact that you had the foresight, Charlene, to go ahead and do that 6 years prior is, a big testament to the insight into what could potentially happen. And, right down to wigs and parking, never mind the medication and the mortgage payments and all of those kinds of things. So, it really is, a testament to your well-being and your ability to recover. And, certainly Kim with your company benefits. So I think it's one of those things where, you really need to understand what coverage you do have and what the difference would be if you had an additional coverage, like in your case, Charlene.
Yeah, and sometimes if you have, maybe history in your family, you think, okay, maybe I'm the person who should be getting coverage. But then there's other people like myself, I felt like I was healthy. I didn't have the history. There was some personal worries, but it always came back clear. So no problem. But I still didn't think to get that kind of insurance. Although thankfully my company covered almost everything, which was wonderful for me. But if I didn't have that, I'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, and even to that point, yes, my mom is a 3-time cancer survivor, including breast cancer twice, but actually my breast cancer was not the same kind of breast cancers that my mother had. So you just don't know, right?
That's right.
So breast cancer, what I can tell you is we used to think there was 3 different types of breast cancer, but now we know there's over 50. And of those 50, they can potentially act different in each individual. So every individual is slightly different when it comes to breast cancer. And we now have progressed so far with research that we can treat each person differently. So that's thanks to what we call precision oncology or personalized medicine. So Charlene, you mentioned having your tumor tested. And now we can take those tests, those tumor tests, and we can really drill down on what exactly type of tumor you have and how that's going to respond to drugs and chemotherapy and treatment. So now, for example, there's a number of different types of breast cancer that don't require chemotherapy. And you wouldn't have to go through, wigs and except you still have to go through parking, but you can imagine how different your journey would have been had you not had to have chemotherapy. And I know, Charlene, you and I have spoken before about the difference that you've seen in research just between the diagnosis that your mother received and the diagnosis that you yourself have received with that personal treatment.
Yeah, for sure. When I think back to my mom's first breast cancer diagnosis in 1997, the detection and also the surgical procedure was very different. Back then, they removed all the lymph nodes under the arm. And now basically what they do is something called a sentinel node biopsy. So they take the first 1 to 3 lymph nodes under the arm, test those at the same time as they're doing surgery. And if they come back negative, then they know that it has not progressed any further. And why that's important is because those lymph nodes really help to fight infection when you're well, if you have a cold and such. So it's important to be able to have those lymph nodes, and it's incredible how different and how much research has mattered in terms of surgical outcomes and detection.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't experience that, and it made my recovery probably much easier as well. I didn't have to leave with, drainage and that type of thing. So
you are lucky. Yeah. I had 16
yes.
removed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but thankfully they came back clear. So that's the good news. But yes, it's so important now that we can have this precision oncology. And I know, Kimberly, you've talked before about these researchers are so passionate. They're young, they're passionate. This is all they're doing. And they're just trying to make our lives easier with something that it impacts 1 in 8 people, 1 in 8 women.
1 in 8 women, and those are Canadian statistics. It's 1 in 8 women in Canada. So we know that over 27,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year. The World Health Organization last year in February of 2021 declared that breast cancer was the most diagnosed cancer in the world. And that's the first time that's ever happened, which is a, you know, a huge revelation, I think, in the progression of the disease. Now, what we can say is that our treatments are way better. So if, you know, we're catching you at early stages, as Charlene indicated, you know, stage 1, stage 2 through mammograms and screening, you know, we stand a much better chance of looking at a full recovery. So we're, you know, we're thrilled with some of the results, some of the treatments, some of the progression, and there's some really exciting developments coming in breast cancer research and in breast cancer screening. We're anticipating that there will be a blood test coming in recent times. I'm going to say less than a year or so.
Wow.
That will, yeah, so it's very exciting. That will help indicate, you know, the potential for breast cancer through the blood test. Now, it won't at this point eliminate mammograms, but it'll be in addition to. So it's really exciting research. It's really exciting technology, and just, you know, even just the changes in the mammogram machines, you know, going from sort of a one-dimensional or two-dimensional to a three-dimensional imaging. It just gives the medical community and the researchers a much better view of what they're actually dealing with, and, you know, it makes it less intrusive as sorry it makes it less intrusive for surgery. It makes, you know, the recovery of the patient much better. You know, we've seen leaps and bounds in breast cancer research, and just the treatment, the recovery, the diagnosis, the screening. There's just so many things that precision oncology is making such a big difference with. And, you know, we're really excited about some of the things that are coming in the future. And I'm hoping that, you know, there'll be a day where, what is it that we like to say? There'll be a day where we don't have to use the research. No one has to use the research that we're funding. It would be
Yes.
fantastic. But yeah, there's a lot of young researchers doing a lot of really interesting work. Certainly with the use of AI, we're seeing leaps and bounds in changes in that as well.
It's funny, even Herceptin is not that old of a discovery. I feel like Herceptin is one of the things that really saved my life. My nurse, my oncology nurse practitioner, had breast cancer about 20 plus years ago, and she said she doesn't even know if she's HER2 positive or not, because they didn't test for that back then. So I mean, she's surviving, she's doing wonderfully, thankfully. But I mean, it's recent discoveries, and I've spoken to some of the researchers on your team, and they say things are happening like every day, new discoveries. They said, if for whatever reason your breast cancer returns, you're more likely to survive now than ever before with what we are finding. So there's a lot of positive news despite how scary the whole thing is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the interesting things in the chat too is that, you know, some of those needles are $8,000 each, and
Yeah.
you know, your insurance at work didn't cover them. So, you know, Charlene's foresight to have looked at insurance so far in advance was really wise, very wise. Because we don't plan for, and, you know, and I hear breast cancer stories every day. I speak to breast cancer survivors every day, and they all say the same thing. I was healthy, you know, most of them say I had no family history, or if they had family history, they didn't know what the history was. And, you know, further to your point, they didn't have the level of knowledge that we have now, where we can actually pinpoint the type of disease it is, right? If it's, you know, HER2 positive, or, you know, triple negative, or what it is. And like I said previously, we used to think there was only 3 kinds. Now we know there's over 50, and we know there's probably more that we just haven't been able to actually identify yet. So it's coming.
I'm sure there's more on the horizon. Hopefully
There's
not. I wanted to mention one of the questions we had from Lynn Tran. Says she's an areola tattoo restorative artist for Ivory Ink, and would tattoos be covered? Sometimes surgeons may cover, but I think, Charlene, what you were mentioning was that you got a sum of money that you could spend however way you wanted to. And I'm thinking if that was maybe something somebody wanted to do after reconstructive surgery, that perhaps that's what they would spend their money on. I don't, you know, I didn't have that, so I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, I didn't have that myself either, but certainly I could have used the money from my critical illness insurance policy
Okay.
to cover whatever I wanted. So if I had elected to go that route, it certainly wouldn't have been an issue with my critical illness insurance policy. Remember, critical illness insurance, and I'm not an insurance expert, Adam is here.
We're going to bring him in just a sec. Yeah.
But it's basically designed, or at least my policy was designed to pay out a lump sum if I was to receive a critical illness diagnosis. And again, I was allowed to spend the money however I wish. And that's what I did. It's not an insurance as in a group benefit type of plan insurance. It's completely different. And Adam perhaps can address that when we bring him in.
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention too is to Kimberly's point about research and innovation. You know, since my diagnosis, I did go through genetic testing because I mentioned I have a daughter who's 21. I also have a niece who's 19. And through that genetic testing, I discovered that I actually don't have the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. So the likelihood of my breast cancer being passed down through my mother to me is very slim. And hopefully that means that the likelihood of my breast cancer being passed down to my daughter or niece is also slim. But you know, that genetic testing was not available when my mom had her first breast cancer diagnosis in 1997. And, you know, I do think it's important research because, you know, if I did have the BRCA1 and BRCA2, my daughter might need to make some different decisions.
That's right.
But through this all, my daughter and my niece are both much more well-informed in terms of what they need to do to plan for their futures financially, medically, and otherwise. So I do really appreciate all the research that the Breast Cancer Society of Canada is leading because it's very important and impactful.
Yeah, hugely. It's nice to know where our money is going and that it's leading to so many great discoveries. People talk about a cure, but it's more about treatment and helping people live with this disease and live well. I'm going to bring in Adam now because Adam is our RBC insurance expert, and he's going to talk a little bit about why we should plan. I mean, we're hearing Charlene's story. We know why we should plan. She did it. She's one of the lucky ones, not the 100% who answered that poll and said we're not prepared. So, Adam, who are the kinds of people that you talk to? Are they already thinking about this, or are you the kind of person to bring it up first and say, you know, have you thought about this?
I know. First off, great conversation today, and it's a pleasure to be here. You know, it's always a tough conversation, and it's not necessarily on the top of someone's mind, right? To think that the unexpected is going to happen, but the reality is, 1 in 3 Canadians will suffer a critical illness before the age of 65. So these are true stats, and you know, a critical illness is something that we may not be thinking about or planning for, but in the event something were to happen, you really need to think about your own financial affairs and answer 3 questions. The first is, do you have disposable income, liquid cash put away to be able to access in the event you are unable to work, or you require treatment that's not covered in addition to? So in many cases, when you have a critical illness, and even if you do have group benefits through work, those group benefits may not top you up completely. And some of the medication or you know, things that are needed to be able to overcome something like breast cancer require additional income in addition to your regular cash flow, because the reality is the property taxes are going to stay the same. If you're renting, the rent's going to stay the same. Your landlord's not going to give you a break. The hydro's going to stay the same. The internet's going to stay the same. The TV's going to stay the same. Your food bills are going to stay the same, if not be higher. And so you have to think about this as part of your financial planning strategy. And the reality is, Kim, that most Canadians do not think about this until a life event takes place. And so what is a life event? A family, friend, something that happens to you independently, something you see, something that's close to your heart that touches you, where you say, do I have the coverage? We at RBC Insurance across, Canada-wide do our best in terms of educating Canadians, but the reality is, do we have the ability to educate 35 million plus Canadians? No. And so I think it's going to require people to put up their hand and to say it's okay to get the advice that they need.
I feel
And
like,
it's okay
just to
ask
interrupt you
those
for a second, I feel like
questions.
the pandemic was one of those aha moments for a
Absolutely.
lot of people. I mean, if you're going to get a mass amount of people to suddenly consider what it's like to be out of your work for whatever reason, and certainly for illness for many people, I mean, I'm sure it was a huge wake-up call for so many Canadians who found themselves in trouble in the last 2 years.
The pandemic was an accelerator for our business, and we never used it to put fear in clients' eyes, but we used it to educate, right? To educate people on why they need coverage. We lived through a really big life health event. We've paid numerous claims, whether it's pandemic related or non-pandemic related, and we're in the business of paying claims. We're in the business of taking care of people, but it's going to require someone to get the advice that they need. And in my personal opinion, the advice that you need is very customized and is based on your own unique situation. So there really isn't a cookie cutter 1, 2, 3 option. It depends on you, it depends on your needs, it depends on your existing health, it depends on your family, it depends on if you have a mortgage or if you don't have a mortgage, or if you've got debt or if you don't have debt, or if you're self-employed or you're employed through an organization. There are so many factors. And so there really isn't one answer to be able, or one solution, I should say, to be able to help you alleviate this. But it starts with the value of advice, and it starts with speaking to a human, speaking to someone who can give you, you know, effective advice, and you make the decision on what you think you need for your family. And the options are flexible.
What about someone like me, say, who
Yep.
is a breast cancer survivor, but
Yep.
has no trace of cancer, has been in remission for 5 years? Is there any chance for people like me to get critical insurance now, or because of my history, would it be a no-go?
That's a great question, and one we get a lot. You know, the answer really around critical illness is it's very challenging to get critical illness insurance once you've had a critical illness. But it is very possible to get disability insurance, which is basically what I'd like to call income protection insurance. So if you're unable to work, right, or if your organization tops you up to a certain amount and you've got a balance that needs to be additionally topped up to. We also have life insurance, and we insure people all the time that have had previous critical illnesses. So the answer is, Kim, yes, there are options, even with people that have had critical illnesses. And again, it's very customizable. It depends on where you are in your remission kind of process, and you know, where you are in terms of your personal life, but age-wise, health-wise, but lots of options available.
It sounds almost like personalized medicine through with breast cancer. It sounds very personalized, right? Your cancer diagnosis is very you know, it's very personal. We use precision oncology to decide what your treatment's going to be. It's very personal. And I think, Adam, you're saying exactly the same thing, right? It's very personal.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's very important to consider is that as you get older, the price goes up and the chances of getting qualified at standard rates goes down, okay? And so it's very important that you take the opportunity to get the knowledge. It really just starts with education and knowledge. And so, you know, for people that have suffered a critical illness or that haven't, the question that you need to ask yourself is, do you have the adequate knowledge so that you're protected in the event something happens? If the answer is yes, that's awesome. And I'm really happy that you've gone out and seek that knowledge. But unfortunately, Canadians, for the most part, do not have that as part of their plan. They may have RESPs, they may have stocks, they may be, you know, playing the market frequently, but that's not going to cover them in the event something happens.
What about people who don't have a lot of money, say, like somebody who's maybe living paycheck to paycheck, and they're saying, well, the last thing I can afford now is something that's not a guarantee. It's, you know, it's insurance that may or may not happen. What do you tell those people? Because obviously it's going to be important for them too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think for people like that, it's very important that you think about, you know, your personal situation. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you were to suffer a critical illness, you actually wouldn't have that next paycheck to take care of yourself. So you would actually be in more of a unique situation than people that maybe have 3, 6, 9, or a couple of years of savings put away, or they're in liquidable assets. And so, Kim, what I would say is it starts with a budget, and it starts with what's important to your budget. And so, generally we have products that are quite inexpensive. They're called term products. They're temporary products. We also have permanent products. Permanent products are more expensive. The analogy I like to use is term products is like renting a home. Permanent products is like buying a home or owning a home. So it's more of a long-term investment versus a short-term investment. And your advisor or the person that you seek out advice from would be able to go through your budget and do what they can to find the room that's needed, at an affordable price based on your needs.
A lot of Canadians think our healthcare is covered. Everything is covered. I mean, I was very grateful to be living in this country and to have breast cancer in Canada rather than somewhere else, because I know I have American friends who have a much tougher time because of the insurance that they have to, have access to and how expensive everything is. So I was one of the lucky ones. I was really happy that I got through the whole process relatively unscathed financially, but only because of the situation I was in, working full-time for a company. My husband, however, works for himself. He's a freelancer. And so if something were to happen to him, it would be a completely different story. But as we're saying here, Adam, just because we have free healthcare, that's not going to cover so much of what this is. I mean, sure, your treatment may be free, but as Charlene was mentioning, not the drugs, and certainly your pay. If you're not getting your money, you're not paying your bills, and the last thing people need is to be out of their home.
And the priority when someone suffers a critical illness is not financial. The priority is taking care of your health. Financial should be secondary. And so you want to be able to get access to the best healthcare possible. I mean, we've heard stories about people driving to Buffalo, right? Because they can't get an MRI in time, or they've gone to a private clinic because they need access to resources that are not available due to wait times. We saw that in the pandemic with significant wait times across what I would call essential and non-essential, surgeries or operations or appointments. And so having that financial flexibility gives you options to really take care of your health. We also know that people that have that financial protection in place, they actually have better survival rates long-term than people that don't, because that added level of stress or anxiety about how I'm going to pay my next bill is not there, or not as prevalent as it would be without the protection.
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlene, you even said that with the additional insurance coverage you had, you actually managed to get back to work quicker and healthier, and were able to return to a normal routine a little bit faster. So, I mean, Charlene would be living proof of exactly what you're saying, Adam. I love your analogy, Adam, of the house. Maybe you could share that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the analogy I like to use around, so I see it's up there. Perfect. So when you think about a builder, right? Think about someone who's building a house. It could be a condominium, apartment, house, it doesn't matter. The analogy is the same. The first thing a builder needs to do is they need to lay a very, very strong foundation. Why? Because in the event there is significant storms, there is events that take place, what happens to that house without a strong foundation? That house comes crumbling down. And so think about your basic insurance. So your group benefits, your life insurance, your health insurance, your critical illness, your disability, that's your foundation. The first floor would be some of the things that you feed as part of your savings, whether it's non-registered savings accounts, TFSAs, RRSPs. In the second floor is your self-directed investments. So these are stocks, bonds, mutual funds, passive or active income strategies. But what we see is Canadians actually building their homes upside down. And so they start with the attractive stuff, which is the self-directed investments, the RRSPs, the RESPs, and then something, God forbid, happens, and tragically the house comes crumbling down because that foundation isn't there. And that foundation should be, not a huge chunk of the overall income that's coming into the family. So, for the people that are on this call today, I do not want you to think that insurance should cost 5, 10, 15, 20% of the income that's coming in the door. Absolutely not. There are very affordable and flexible options. The point that I'm trying to make is that without that strong foundation, without that bare minimum of what's required, if that's not there, you're at risk of that house crumbling down. And we've seen that time and time again. And an event like cancer, breast cancer, is an event that can have that house come crumbling down without some of those, key protection strategies.
It's interesting because I find that conversations like this are so helpful, because it's not about lecturing people. It's about people like Charlene or myself saying, this actually happened to me. And Charlene was prepared. I had not gone ahead and prepared. Thankfully, I was under the umbrella of my company, and that helped me tremendously. But there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think, what if they weren't there for me? And what if I was, working for myself? And I think people learn more through cautionary tales. Like they say, oh, well, I know that person, and they experience this firsthand. And so that's why we want to talk about it, because we want to say, you don't have to experience it firsthand. You can prepare for it. You don't have to have it be a surprise. Obviously, breast cancer is almost always a surprise, or any cancer. People don't see it coming, which is the name of this. And I just love this really frank conversation about what it is that you can do to help these people ahead of time. And I can't emphasize enough, and I'm sure you can agree, Charlene, with this, is that, we need support. And what we don't need is to be stressed out about money during this whole journey, because there's just so much more to think about. Charlene, tell me a little bit about your support system when you were, did you have a support system? This is one of the questions that was asked.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I had a great support system, family, friends, colleagues. I actually even had colleagues from work who would send me a care package to my home once a month with all kinds of thoughtful things and inspiring words and that sort of thing. But my family, my mother, my daughter, my friends were absolutely amazing. I talked to many, many people in the oncology wards as well. And I think one of the things that really got me through was knowing that I was one of the fortunate people who were walking in and out of those oncology units every couple times a week. And, there's many people who were not. So, there's always somebody who's worse off than you are. And I kind of lived with the motto of, no matter how bad you feel, get up, show up, dress up, and chin up type of thing. I'm generally a pretty positive person. And I think, my family, my friends, my colleagues, and really just continuing to try to be as active as I possibly could and eat well. I think those things were super top of mind. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but the coverage that I had really let me just focus on getting better. And I know I've talked about critical illness a couple of times, but my disability insurance top up was very material as well. Once you go from short-term disability to long-term disability, that can have a significant financial impact. And I'm grateful that I was able to have that income continue to come in with my disability insurance and be able to contribute to my RSPs and that type of thing to my retirement planning, because I do want to retire healthy and I want to retire on time. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, or the question that was in the chat.
Yeah, and Kimberly, I want to just bring you in for a second here, because we're talking about preparing financially, but we often talk about things that people can do for their health to do whatever they can to prevent breast cancer, like eating well, et cetera. Do you have any insight into that? Because we're talking about being ready for something we don't want to happen, but there are some ways that we can make it a little bit easier for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. They're the standard sort of things where, you do need to have a mammogram done. And, if it's yearly or some provinces and territories is every 2 years, but certainly make sure that that mammogram gets done, that screening gets done. And when the blood test comes in, that'll be helpful as well. And yeah, eat healthy, exercise, limit alcohol intake, no smoking, all of those things that you're not supposed to do. But yeah, I mean, all of those things will help absolutely help in the journey, and certainly do some kind of prevention. But yeah, your number one biggest step is to make sure you get that mammogram done. And like Charlene attested to, and you attested to, Kim, that's what made the difference for you. That's why things are well today.
Yes, absolutely. I was paying close attention. I had some signs and went to my doctor first. But yes, so many people tell me now that because I spoke publicly about my journey and I blogged about what happened to me, that they went and got their mammogram. And some people have messaged me to say I was going to cancel it because I was afraid or I didn't want to do it. But they changed their mind after reading my story. And yes, it's like getting in there as early as possible, because people are afraid to find out the diagnosis, but the earlier they find out, the better their chances. And I think this all ties into with the insurance. Like the earlier you get in, the earlier you protect yourself, the better your chances of being, financially secure if anything, God forbid, happens.
Yeah, there was a question at one point too about what age that young adults should be considering this type of insurance. I guess that was directed towards maybe Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a tough one to answer, right? There's not a specific age. Like at age 15, you got to go and do this. The answer I would give most people is when you are in a situation where you would be financially constrained in the event a critical illness or life event or health event were to happen, start the conversation. Remember, a conversation doesn't cost you anything. And I want to make it very clear, we are not here to sell insurance. We are here to educate Canadians on what they need and what their options are. It's up to Canadians then to decide which way they want to go with the help of a licensed and educated advisor. And, I use the analogy of buying a cell phone or going on a trip. So today, if someone's going to hop on a plane, they're probably going to want to get travel insurance, right? Travel insurance is very difficult to get today. And I can tell you that because the phones are off the hook. People are calling and they're getting travel insurance. When you're buying the new iPhone, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, that's $2,000. And they ask you, do you want to add a $49 warranty on it in the event you drop your phone and it cracks? Most people are going to say, yeah, I'll add that warranty. So the analogy I like to use is think about yourself as that machine in that basement every day that prints $100 bills. Every day you wake up, you go to the basement, you collect your $100 bills for the day. If I asked you, do you want a warranty on that machine? Would you say yes or no? Most people would say, I would definitely put a warranty
Yes.
on that machine. And guess what that machine is? That's you. You are the person going out there every day printing those $100 bills. And we do not want that machine to break down. We have to protect that machine in the event something happens.
Okay, so if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Adam, or anybody, because we talk about, I like to do my Google searches, I like to do my Google research and find out what's what and read reviews, etc. But I think nothing beats the face-to-face. So where is someone to start? Like right now they're saying, well, I don't know, I don't even have a financial advisor, perhaps. What am I supposed to do from here?
Yeah, so it starts with a conversation. It can be done in person, it can be done virtually, whatever you're comfortable with. I'd recommend a great place to go is www.rbcinsurance.com/check-in. The link will be actually dropped, I believe, and sent in. And the link is a bit longer because it's customized for this
There
event.
we go. We've got it in the chat.
Beautiful. Start with the call, a conversation. Have a virtual coffee with someone and ask all the questions you have. No obligation. And, in the end, if you say, I'm okay, I can sustain this on my own, or I can self-fund this on my own, that's totally fine. But you have the peace of mind that you went out and got the advice.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I hope people do just go into the chat. And I think anybody who's been on this webinar will also get an email after the fact. They can know where to go. Also, if you want to know more about what the Breast Cancer Society is doing, bcsc.ca is and Kimberly has it up on her name as well. bcsc.ca is the website that you can go to for more information. Of course, we've got some big fundraisers coming up, Billion Steps to Mother's Day. So I just wanted to thank all of our our panelists, Charlene, Kimberly, of course, Adam as well, for all of your insight today and sharing your stories and giving us the information that we need. This was the second in our webinar series about health and wellness straight talk. This one called Didn't See It Coming, Financing the Unexpected. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you got a lot out of this webinar today.